My name is Tim Jansen. I'm a qualified mental health nurse and I'm also a chaplain in psychiatry for the NHS in Sheffield. Over the last 2.5 years I've done quite a bit of research around mental health of children and youth workers in the Sheffield Methodist District as well as the Diocese of Sheffield. One of the things that came back was that actually half of the children and youth workers experience low mood at a regular basis. About a third of them has they experienced panic attacks. And about a fifth of them self-harmed. Today I want to talk with you about what happens when mental health and spirituality meet each other. And when I say spirituality, I mean that part inside of us that connects to our faith. I want to start by sharing with you a piece of research which I find really helpful to just have that initial look into what happens when mental health and faith meet. For many, spirituality was the bottom line. The final foundation that could be held on to as illness set in and all other aspects of life were lost. People describe their only source of connectedness and hope as God, or the stilling of the mind via meditation and mindfulness, or the beauty of nature that tempted them not to give up because they wanted to see more of it. Let's start with looking at what that connection to God that gives hope is. Connection to God is important, I think, for all Christians, but particularly when we go to mental distress. Mental distress can be very invasive, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. It's important to know that the connection with God and being hopeful is really important in our recovery. There are many ways of connecting to God. I think the most common way that we know of probably is praying, but so is worshipping. So is perhaps talking with others about God and about how we feel. Another way of connecting with God, of course, is communion. But when we go to mental distress, connecting to God can become very difficult. That has nothing to do with the fact that our faith might be less or that we are lesser Christians. On the contrary, I think it becomes more evident how important it actually is for you. But it doesn't take away that mental distress can really interfere with how you connect or how you feel connected to God. Some of the things I like to share with people that I work with on the mental health wards are things like simple prayers. Prayers that we know very well are easier to say. For instance, the Our Father is a really good one. Praying the Our Father is a prayer that for most of us will know very, very well. It helps us connect to God even if our thinking is disturbed by our poor mental health. Another thing we sometimes do on the wards is take communion to people on the wards if they ask for this. I know that in your local church probably it's very normal to take communion to those who are ill and can't come to church. But the same goes for mental health. If our mental health and our mental distress is so bad that we can't make it to church, why not ask someone to come and celebrate communion at your home? Or maybe even better, as a church we should be aware of the fact that we can offer this to people, to offer this connection to God. But regardless of all the things we can try to establish this connection with God and maintain it, it can be that when you go through mental distress you feel completely disconnected of yourself, of others and even of God. And it's very easy to then think that there's something wrong with you and that you're doing something wrong. But don't forget, as Paul writes, there's nothing that can ever come between the love of God for us. That means that maybe we might feel disconnected, but God is not disconnected from us. And when we are ready, little by little, small steps, God will be waiting for us. The second part of the research talks about the stilling of the mind through meditation and mindfulness. Now sometimes we can get a bit confused about meditation and mindfulness, but I think it's really good to realize that meditation and mindfulness have been present from the very beginning of Christianity. Particularly the Desert Fathers and Mothers started that tradition, but it's been kept alive mainly in monastic traditions over the last 2000 years. Mental distress interferes with the way we think, feel and behave. And that's really important to know, because there's nothing in life that we do that doesn't involve thinking, feeling or behaving. That is one of the reasons why mental distress is so difficult, because it doesn't give us space to recover. That's why mindfulness and meditation can be so helpful. They can give these little spaces where we can just catch our breath mentally and go on from there. There's many ways to experience mindfulness and meditation in a Christian way, and there are plenty of resources out there. It is important to find something that really works for you. For me, for myself, I like to sit on the floor. I like to have an icon with a picture on it that tells a story, or I like to listen to some music and let that story or that music fill me completely. Sometimes I like to read psalms. Other moments I might like to read some poetry. It's what works for me, but it's important that you find what works for you. Another thing that is really useful to use in the sense of meditation and mindfulness are the psalms themselves. Psalms are very varied and they're very real. Some of them are very uplifting, but others speak of true pain inside, despair, the lack of hope. And some of them actually are really, really angry at God. And that is okay. Not all of them end in a pleasant way. But if we can acknowledge that, if we can say those psalms, if we can pray with those psalms, if we can sing those psalms, then we're being honest towards God. And that can liberate us of the feeling that we need to be in a specific way with God. It liberates us so that we can be open and honest with God. The last piece of the research talks about the impact nature or creation can have on us. And I think that's often very much underestimated. Behavioral change psychology tells us that the thing that is most supportive in making changes in ourselves is actually our environment. So if we go through mental distress and we want to help ourselves, it's actually a really good idea to change the scenery around us. Hopefully by now we've all heard that physical activities are really good for our mind for a variety of reasons. But it's even better if those activities take place outside in nature. Two birds with one stone, so to say. Whether it's walking, running, cycling, going outside, in a forest, by the seaside, whatever works for you. It's a really good way for our brains to rest, but it also encourages a very small change inside ourselves that can be helpful when we work towards recovery. I know from when I went through a clinical depression that it was really difficult for me to come to anything at all. And I know the same goes for many people with depression. But also people with anxiety and all kind of other mental health problems. They can almost lock us inside ourselves, inside our homes, and it becomes almost impossible to go out. But it doesn't mean we can't surround ourselves with the beauty of nature. We know from extensive research that, for instance, a lot of plants in our house make us happier. A lot of plants in our office makes us more productive. Have you ever walked past a fish tank and stopped and just stared at it? I think we all have done that. What is so fascinating about it? I think there's something inside of us that desperately wants to communicate with the creation that God has given us, around us. And it can be really helpful. Just as mindfulness and meditation can give us that quick break from our distress, so can admiring creation. Appreciating nature, even if it's just for a second, is a bit like the rest and reprieve you get when we just talked about meditation and mindfulness. And that's why I think it's really important. But there's another reason that I think the nature and creation around us is so important. For us Christians, we believe God created the world. He created all things in them. And then in the very end, He added humanity to it. It is almost impossible to think that God would have created a world that wouldn't be appropriate for humans. In fact, I'm convinced that the way God has created the world is to make us humans flourish. When we connect with the beauty of creation, we also connect to God who has created it all. I started this little video with a bit of research I've done. And as a former youth worker and someone who talks with youth and children workers on a regular basis, as well as clerical staff, I can't emphasize how important it is for you to take care of your mental health. You've got a very big responsibility taking care of young people and children, but you also got a very big responsibility taking care of yourself. Whether that is by connecting to God through prayer, worship, or whatever works for you, or through meditation and mindfulness, or by surrounding yourself by nature, that is completely up to you. If I can give you one piece of advice, is that take time to take care of your mental health. If you do that, you will not just discover that you feel better in your mind, but I believe it will also bring you closer to God. Thank you.